routine. Welcome back to the Washington Reporter podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Wool. With us here, as always, is Ernie Veritimos. Ernie, how's it going?
Doing great. Winning.
Well,
Today was the biggest winning week that we've had in a long time.
This week has been a whole lot of winning, like few weeks we've seen before. So we're going to cover all of it. It's going to be tough. We've got a lot to talk about. I mean, we're talking about win after win after win this week, like few other weeks before.
Yeah, unfortunately capped by a little bit of last-minute tragedy, too.
Yeah, we're going to get into all of it. We're going to do our best. Stick with us. We've got some exciting things to talk about today in the show. Not the normal propaganda. For all you first-time listeners, this isn't going to be your normal mainstream media lies, propaganda, talking points, and then counter talking points to try to deconstruct the lies. We just look at the lies plainly, deconstruct them, and get to the truth, get to what you need to know. And there's so much to talk about, particularly with the Supreme Court. The left is already off of the crying baby children. Melania went down to the border again today to visit a facility. Almost no coverage from the mainstream media, almost nothing.
Well, Fox News did, and CNN did have like an inset, but they were focusing on the Senate hearings.
Right. The Senate hearings of Rod Swampenstein and Christopher.
Swampenstein, that's good.
Christopher the Jester Ray. That's what I mean. That guy, that weird, creepy smile he's always got on his face. He looks like Cat in the Hat or something. It's really bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get into that as well. But the Supreme Court is where the action is happening this week. Kennedy is stepping down from the Supreme Court. Of course, he is a Republican, or so he claims, but he's ruled with the left many, many times. He is the swing vote in the Supreme Court.
He was nominated by President Reagan.
He was nominated by Reagan. He's proven to be a little bit of a lefty from time to time. He was always the Democrats' hope. You know, whenever there was a decision where the Constitution very clearly put it towards the side of whoever the Republicans were arguing, the Democrats' hope was Kennedy. Kennedy's going to come through and save us. Kennedy's going to be the swing vote. And many times that's what he was. Many times he came through and helped out the Democrats before the Supreme Court. Of course, the Supreme Court is a political body. Make no mistake. The Supreme Court is not a court. People that think about this in constitutional terms really get themselves into trouble. What you need to worry about is who's a Democrat and who's a Republican. Because at the Supreme Court, the Democrats will go down the Democrat line and the Republicans will go down the Republican line. And so to think of the Supreme Court as anything else and to buy into the pageantry and the show that this is some sort of constitutional arbiter that we can trust, you got to throw all that out. You want right-wing, pro-gun, pro-constitution Republicans on the Supreme Court if you're somebody who wants to preserve American values. And I think that what lays that out so clearly this week was maybe the least covered case, the least covered decision that the Supreme Court laid out, which was a decision about abortion, or rather general family clinics in California. And the state of California wanted to compel these clinics to display abortion options and advertise abortions, advertise state-funded abortions. They wanted to compel them to do that or put them out of business. And the Supreme Court said, no. You can't force them to advertise your government-funded abortions. Sorry, you just can't do it. First Amendment, they don't want to say it. They don't have to say it. And what was remarkable is that this case came down to a 5-4 decision. Something so cut and dry as can the government compel your speech? Can they compel you to act? And yet it came down to a 5-4 decision. Well, we think back to the Heller case, which was basically a case, if you remember, folks, between D.C. and Heller, which decided whether or not the Second Amendment meant that you had to be part of a militia because it uses the word militia, or whether it just applies to everyone. This was a case that could have single-handedly torn the Constitution to pieces, torn the Second Amendment to pieces, and it came down to a 5-4 vote.
Well, hey, was there any vote, any major vote this past week that didn't come down to a 5-4 vote?
No. Not that I've seen.
He says rhetorically.
No. The recent case that didn't come down to a 5-4 was the Gay Baker case. That one did not come down to a 5-4, did it? I think it was 7-2. That's right. It was 7-2, I recall. As I
Yeah,
recall. A very narrow decision, as the New York Times said. Very narrow decision.
but that was last week.
That was last week, right? So the Supreme Court's very important, folks. The Supreme Court is the final word on many laws, many assaults on the Constitution launched by the left. And so you need to care about what happens on the Supreme Court. Now there's a lot of talk about who will replace Kennedy at the Supreme Court, and there's several names. The name that I've heard tossed around a lot is this Kavanaugh guy. Kavanaugh, he's 53, he's young, he's bright. He comes from the sort of background that people might think. The other name is coming up quite a bit is Mike Lee, Senator Mike Lee. Mike Lee is a Republican senator. He is sort of an old school conservative. He is from Utah. And Mike Lee is the other name that continuously gets, brought up. And the reason that I think Mike Lee is an interesting name here is because Mike Lee is a member of the Senate. He's going to need to be confirmed by the Senate. And that, I think, presents some very interesting dynamics and makes it a lot easier for him to get in because he's an insider. He's part of the club. Bring in someone else, they're going to treat him much more roughly than if you brought in Mike Lee. I think in any event, though, you're going to get somebody on the court that's going to be around for the next 40 years, and they're going to be a conservative, and they're going to be pro-gun, and they're going to replace a guy who was not as ultra-conservative, certainly not pro-gun.
Well, you know what's interesting about Mike Lee? The fact that he's a senator, and if he is the nominee, he'll have to vote for himself.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of crazy. I don't know that there's any rules against it. But then there's also the other kind of side story about Mike Lee. His brother is also
remarkable.
I want to enlighten you to that. And this is also something that's quite remarkable and something that the Democrats have actually praised Trump for. The fact that he did put out a list of 25 names that he's considering that all have been vetted. And he publicized that list so that essentially, both sides can do all the tiering that they want. So they already know the list that he's choosing from.
Right. That list was released, of course, when he was vetting the first pick. And I guess the big question, and then we'll move on to the actual decisions here because there's a lot of ground to cover. We got to move quick. The other thing that I wonder is, what happens to Ruth Ginsburg? How much longer do you think she's going to be around?
She might sleep all the way through the rest of her term.
Yeah. Well, she just might. She's a proud member of the Resistance. She wears her very vulgar hat and wears that weird dissent necklace. Have you heard about all that lore with Ruth?
No, I thought that was like a dream catcher or something.
Yeah, she wears like this big, creepy dream catcher thing around her neck when she's going to dissent on a decision. Very strange.
Does that help her focus?
I think so. She's very old. Funny when you really think about it. It's a kooky old bat. I mean, really, you think about it, it's kind of crazy. Really, really unbelievable. So I want to talk about this Janus decision, Ernie, this Janus decision before the Supreme Court. This
not getting a lot of news.
Not getting a lot of news, not getting talked about. But this decision effectively bankrupts one of the biggest fundraising sources of the Democrat Party, which is, of course, many people don't know that they might be working and a little bit of change might be taken out of their paycheck and it might be just given to Democrats. And this happens to millions of people around the country every year when their paycheck comes. How does this work? Well, unions compel people to join, take their money, and give it to Democrats. The Supreme Court, through this Janus decision, has effectively said that that cannot continue, that you can't compel every month that when they get their paycheck. Apparently, this is something that needed to be ruled on, and it was. And luckily, the court ruled with the Constitution on this and said, you've got your right to free association. You don't need to be involved with Democrat campaigns if you don't want to be. Very clear-cut decision, not getting a lot of news, but really could set up the Democrat Party for a disaster when it comes to fundraising. What do you think?
Over the money that's coming in that they were compelled to pay into. And it was just a direct. And, the other thing is that this is really kind of a part of a bigger movement where they're talking about basic income and making work as a sort of a constitutional right that people have. In other words, everyone should have access to a job and a basic income, and it is as Marxist as you can possibly imagine. And I'm just it's unbelievable that it's lasted as long as it has. And really, they have no retort to it. There's just no way to argue this as something that is needed. And so that's why it's so quiet. You don't hear anything. You hear there's a few protests with some signs that have all been pre-printed and everything. It's not like people are going out there and it's grassroots type of thing. This is all big corporate stuff. But
you're right to point this out, and it's an important point that kind of is an adjunct to this, which is this universal basic income, which is something that you're seeing really get more roots on. It continues to come up, and it's the idea that really they like to sugarcoat this. They like to say that, well, it's going to reduce bureaucracy, it's going to make people happier, it's going to be great, everybody will be happy. There will be no need to work. There will be no financial stress. It will be financial and economic nirvana. Of course, what this really is it's an expansion of the welfare state. It's a reduction in the barriers it takes to become dependent on the government. You don't need to prove that you're not employed. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. They'll just give you a check. It's helicopter money. And of course, it is really counter to what the founders of the welfare state believed, which is that it was to be a safety net. Welfare was always to be a safety net and never to be a career path. Unfortunately, that's what it's become. It's become a career path. There are many communities where it's known you turn 18, you turn 17, economies to shrivel up and go away, because why start a business? Why open a donut shop? Why work at one when you can just get free money? And it causes the likes of South Central Los Angeles to persist in a state of total third world. You see the same thing in Venezuela, but it is something that's being pushed. And
it's huge. It's huge on the Democrat side. This is like part of their vision for the future. As a matter of fact, this new candidate that just recently won that New York State primary against that incumbent Joe Crowley. What's her name? Here, I have it right here. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 28-year-old, devout, quote, democratic socialist, aka communist.
Right.
And this is the basis of her entire campaign is, as a matter of fact, I have it right here. Universal jobs guarantee, Medicaid for everybody, housing as a human right. And so we're going to house people. We're going to pay for them. We're going to pay them a salary. We're going to give them a job. These are all now constitutional rights, according to her. And right. This is their party. This is the party line. This is where they want to go. They look at her as the new face of the Democrats.
But it's not for you. And that's important to remember. You see, if you're listening to this show, you're probably smart. You probably have a job. You probably go to work. You probably pay taxes. Probably already have a place you're living. Maybe you have a couple. You have a car, you have a phone, you have all this stuff. And this isn't for you. Okay? You need to understand that. When they talk about this nirvana free stuff, of course, it's not meant for you. It's not meant for you, the functioning, tax-paying, red-blooded American. No, it's meant for the undertow, the
undocumented immigrants.
The undocumented immigrants, the human debris that happens to spill into your local welfare office, beleaguered, diseased, and hopeless. That's who this is intended for. That's who this is a play for. I don't want a free phone. I'm not
a new source of voters.
It's a new source of voters. It's a very simple equation. It's called open up the borders, offer free stuff, get welfare-dependent migrants that vote for Democrats. It's a very, very simple formula. And it's not us saying this. Just look at Pew Research. 76% of the people that come from south of the border join some form of government assistance. The same number vote for Democrats. Doesn't matter what their socioeconomic class, doesn't matter what they do for a living, sex, it all basically equalizes out. 76%. Pew Research survey, circa 2014. The latest numbers they've got. So it's not us saying this. This is just the numbers. These are just the facts. And so all this free stuff isn't for you. You might think, you might be tempted to think, there might be something in the back of your head that says, wow, that sounds pretty interesting. Not interesting, folks. It's not meant for you. For you, it's just a bill. That's all you're ever going to get. Higher taxes, more money to a nameless, faceless government bureaucrat. Now, you're not going to enjoy the free stuff.
Well, this is actually pretty big news, though. This Ocasio-Cortez, this woman, 28-year-old, coming and upsetting Joe Crowley, who is like, I don't know, a 10-term incumbent, fourth in line to Nancy Pelosi. I mean, this is like huge stuff that she is now, potentially going to be going to, and she's from New York, so the Republican challenger has virtually no chance against her in that area. Maybe there's a outside possibility, but she is really toting this basically communist manifesto.
And of course, the old guard of the Democrat Party is panicked about this. They are panicked because when you look at the polls, only 15% on a good day of Americans support this kind of communist garbage. And so if this becomes the root of the messaging of the party, they're in big trouble. Now, why is this allowed to get any legs? Why are these people allowed to run at all? Because they're good fundraisers.
Yes. She's a community organizer, by the way.
Oh, didn't we have another president that was a community organizer?
Yeah, that's her specialty. She was very proud of that fact.
No, they're good. They're great fundraisers. They get to Twitter, they do their GoFundMe's, and mysteriously all the money turns up. I think it's probably not real crowdfunding. It's probably Soros doing straw man donations. Just my guess.
Bernie was a community organizer too.
Bernie didn't have a job till he's 45, but he finally got in the swing of. I think he lived in a tree. In fact,
well, neither did Barack Obama. He never had a job either.
No, none of these people really had jobs or really did anything. But they persist. So this communism thing is taking over the Democrat Party. There's no doubt about that.
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing. Trump is cheering. Last night at Trump's rally, he said, Maxine, keep going. Don't stop. We love you.
Yes.
And of course he does. He's talking about Maxine Waters, of course, who is now facing assault charges. Been filed. They've been issued. A police report's been issued against Maxine Waters. And many other complaints are coming up. And the Democrat Party is saying, please, Maxine, shut the hell up. Stop talking.
Aren't those assault charges by a friend of the podcast?
Yes, Laura Loomer, in fact. She's starting up a new podcast with her, folks, starting tomorrow, in fact, called Two Live Jews. She came up with the name, not me. That's her name. So that should be fun. That should be fun, and we'll tell you more about that later in the show. But she cornered Maxine Waters and asked her, she said, where can conservatives go to eat? Or do we need to sit in the back of the bus? Using much of the same civil rights language that Maxine loves to use so much. And Maxine got into the elevator. I don't know if anybody saw this, but she looked into the camera and her eyes widened and she started sticking out her tongue and doing these weird things. It was really
she looked mechanical.
She did. She looked like she was possessed. It was demonic. She was sticking her tongue out and shaking her head back and forth. It was really creepy. People have to go watch the video if they haven't seen it. I mean, it's really remarkable.
Her handlers also look kind of mechanical too.
They do.
Members only elevator. Members only elevator. Members only elevator.
Yeah, it's like when Alex Jones cornered Bernie recently at LAX. Same sort of thing. They've got these goons that follow him around. Nobody really knows who these people are. But we
have to get ourselves some members only jackets.
Right. Members only elevator. Members have to vote. It was like a really mindless chant. It's the same thing they do when they show up at these protests. No borders, no walls. We want asylum for all, or whatever their newest chant is.
Shame, shame, shame.
No, it's like you're watching some kind of dystopic movie. You see these people marching around possessed. The men are all seriously emaciated and underweight looking, and the women are, typically speaking, rotund. Very, very heavy set. It is what it is. They've all got the same look. Not impugn. Just you look at these people, and they're very unhealthy. They're very, pale. Usually, it's they've got this look. Funny, you never see any Hispanic folks there, generally speaking, and you never see any black folks. Black Lives Matter protests tend to be a bunch of white social justice warriors. Same with these border things. Have you noticed that?
Weird.
Yeah. So it tends to be the same thing. But that sort of suffices our Supreme Court coverage and ensuing ramble. But I think it's important to stress we are scoring massive victories in the courts, and this is something the media didn't want to talk about all through 2017. We talked about it. We talked about how Trump is reshaping the judiciary, and the mainstream media didn't want to talk about it. The plan is in full effect. It's in full swing. It continues, and it's only getting better by the day. So we're going to continue to follow it. We're going to continue to cover it and talk about what this all means because there's certainly a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I have a little bit to say about this. I think that there's, from all of this, from these decisions, it's starting and also is going to actually address the law. And while may have some conservative bias, generally that doesn't get or filter down into their decision, where on the left side, it almost has nothing to do with the actual Constitution and the interpretation of the Constitution. It has everything to do with the political motive. And absolutely apparent with us, I think it was Sotomayor's dissenting opinion.
You get Democrats in the courts. They rule based on politics. They rule their politics. That is how they write up rulings. We know this. When you get Republicans in the court, they sometimes do this. More often than not, they tend to stick to the Constitution. They're not given a lot of leeway. That's how it works. So it's very simple, folks. You vote for somebody, I don't care how far right they are, for the Supreme Court. You get somebody on the Supreme Court that's very far right.
Well, think about the consequence of something like this. Okay, so you have some of these decisions that are made, and then you go to apply the law. When you apply the law, they're not going to be talking about the politics that led up to the law. They're going to talk about the letter of the law, right? But that's not the basis from which the Democrats' Supreme Court justices are making their decision. They're not doing it on the basis of the letter of the law or the constitutionality of it at all. It is complete activist judges. And that's like kangaroo court stuff. That's third world crap.
But that's what they want. That's what Democrats want. They read the Constitution. They know the president has control of who comes and goes, and yet they want the court to rule that can't tell the government who's going to be allowed in and who's not. They know that Trump can fire the director of the FBI, but they don't care. They don't care about these basic norms. They know that the federal government it's about reshaping America into what they want it to be, which in simple terms is a Western European, neo-socialist, neo-Marxist hellhole with open borders. That's what they want.
Dictatorial rule.
Yeah, that's what these people want.
State-run.
That's what they want. State-run, central planning, bring it on. It is what it is, folks. We can sugarcoat it or we can just get to the point, but that's what it is. So I want to talk about Rosenstein's testimony today. This was remarkable to see. And I couldn't help but take a couple of screen grabs during his testimony and post them on my Twitter. Because the guy was smirking and smiling and laughing like this was just some big joke.
You know who he looks like to me? He looks like the Grinch from Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, I mean, he says,
sick smile.
Ron DeSantis, another friend of the show, one of the best congressmen around, says, was Stefan Halper paid to spy on Trump? Was he paid? Did he ever receive payments? And Rosenstein looks at him and he smirks ear to ear and says, I don't know. I wasn't there.
That was his answer to everything.
I wasn't there.
It's such a big department. I'm not involved in any decision at all. Those are all these other fine people that are doing all the work.
How is it that Rod Rosenstein, who runs the DOJ, of course, Sessions wasn't sitting there. Sessions is off doing God knows what. It could go great. It could go wonderfully. It could go horrific. What difference does it make? We're going to remove Trump. We're going to run him out of there. I'm not talking about what Mueller do. I mean, again, you remember how much liberals bitched and complained when Don Jr. declared attorney-client privilege in a hearing? I mean, it was a story on the news for 3 days. Rod Rosenstein waltzes in there and without declaring any kind of formal privilege or protocol, says, I'm just not going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about what Mueller's up to. I'm not going to talk about the FISA application. I'm just not going to talk about it. Just not going to talk about it. And they stare on and they ask the questions again. And Trey Gowdy does his cute little speech. And then it all is over. And in a week, we'll have forgotten about this and nothing will have happened. And Mueller will have marched on with his witch hunt, on his never ending and very expensive quest to remove the president of the United States from office.
Yeah, I loved it when Jim Jordan was grilling him, and then he had this just shit-eating grin on his face. I'm talking about Rod Rosenstein, and then every once in a while he got under Rod's skin, and then he would belt back at him as if he was going to invoke some kind of justice, later on. You better watch what you're saying, Jim Jordan.
Right.
That's how it felt.
No, it is. He was menacing them. He was. No, Rod Rosenstein was sitting there menacing members of Congress the same way that he menaced them back in February, where it's been widely reported that Rosenstein walked into their office and said, listen up, I'm going to subpoena your phone calls and go after you and expose you. That's what he said. And then they said, it's been widely reported in the media. My staffers were there. I mean, that's what he said. And he sits there and he says, those reports aren't correct. He sits there and he just lies through his teeth to Congress and says, never said that. Nope, that's wrong. Never said that. I mean, this guy is a menace. Rosenstein is a menace like few we've ever seen before Congress. And, Chris Wray, who didn't do much talking, sits there with this deranged look on his face with his eyes kind of floating around and big jester smile, really weird look. And he just kind of sits there, he's got these weird kind of gesticulations he's doing, but he doesn't really talk. And then they waltz out of there. They say that went well. They pat each other on the back into the witch hunt, which, by the way, the bill's up to $22 million now, according to Trump's tweet this morning.
Are they not going to issue a subpoena or hold him in contempt?
I don't think they're going to hold him in contempt. And even if they do, what difference does it make? They held Holder in contempt. And the only difference here is holding Rosenstein in contempt has more power because Trump would maybe fire Rosenstein. When it was Obama and Fast and Furious and they held Holder in contempt, they knew that Obama was under no circumstances going to fire Holder, although Holder did resign in following years and months. So that's what happened there. So there's a slight difference, but I don't think that it's going to make a huge difference here. They're refusing to say who even works for Mueller anymore. You notice that? That's a question they asked Rosenstein. Wouldn't answer. Who works for Robert Mueller? None of your business. Do they support Hillary Clinton? Are they Democrats? I don't know. Bullshit. All these people worked for the foundation. How do you not know that? If you're the deputy attorney general, did you sign the FISA warrant? I don't remember. Well, I've got it right here. You signed it. Wasn't there. I mean, the guy just lies about things that, frankly, he has no reason to lie about. It would seem. Just lies and lies and lies and lies and lies. That's Rod Rosenstein. So it continues. It's very real. The witch hunt is happening, and it's going with more vigor than ever before. It's funny because we were just talking a couple of weeks ago, and the bill for the witch hunt was at $15 million, and now it's up to 22 in just a couple of weeks.
It's a bubble.
It's a bubble. What are they doing? What are they doing? What is the money? Where is it going? What are they spending money on? I mean, what I posed is that, I posited a theory a couple of weeks ago. I said maybe what they've done is they've bought a nuclear submarine and they're actually reenacting the movie, The Hunt for Red October. And perhaps they've even hired in the very same actors from the movie because they want the full effect of a true hunt for the Russians. But just a theory. I don't know what they could possibly be spending this much money on. It does lick of sense to me. But we'll see where this goes. We'll try to keep up with it. I mean, it's we're just tracking one lie after the next from these guys as they try to remove the president from office. That's all, folks. We're just doing our best here. It is really, really tough to keep up with the lies and the deception and all the new breaks. But one thing that wasn't seen confirmed, and this is really the last thing that I took away from it, is he did confirm into Trump, went back to all the way back to June of 2015, which is right after Trump announced. Rosenstein confirmed that. So from the very second he announced, they were going after him.
So that was an official opening of an investigation, or?
Well, that's when the early stages of, diplomatic cables. What is a diplomatic cable? I don't even know. Is it an email?
Well, no, yeah, but what this means is that they're starting, before they actually officially start the investigation, they go and they do a little bit of groundwork. When they do something like that, that it's completely political.
Right. They're fishing. They're fishing
Yes.
around. Oh, and the other thing that Rosenstein said is they asked him, "Did you threaten to subpoena phone calls?" He says, "You can't subpoena phone calls." And the whole crowd laughs. I said, "What's the laugh? That's not true. That's just another falsity that he's spewing. Of course you can subpoena phone calls. What is this? You can't subpoena phone calls? What is that? Of course you can. Of course you can. There's 10 different ways to subpoena phone calls. He was
trying to use an alliteration to try to trip him up. That's all.
You could do a 702 query. You could seek a FISA warrant. You could use a national security letter. You could subpoena the phone company. You could subpoena the maker of the phone calls, one or the other, and you could subpoena them for any records of the calls. There's 10 or 15 different ways you could subpoena a phone call. And he sits there with a straight face, actually not with a straight face, with a nice little insolent smirk, and says you can't subpoena phone calls. What was that about? But that's all I really got. I got one lie after the next from a deep state swamp rat who I called that from the very beginning. And that's all I saw in that meeting. And it was about as fun as they can be to watch, but little more than that is expected to come of this.
It was grandstanding mostly.
Yeah, Hannity will be a fun show tonight. He'll probably have a few of these guys on. But that's really all there is there, folks. All talk, all symbology, symbolic votes, no substance. No substance. Until there's a second special prosecutor, there's going to be no substance.
All right, so all the headlines now are saying Rod Rosenstein shuts down Jim Jordan in fiery hearing. Rod Rosenstein shuts down Jim Jordan. That's down Jim Jordan. Rod Rosenstein, that's from the Washington Post. From the Examiner, shuts down Jim Jordan. The Huffington Post keeps his cool as Republicans lash out. CNN, Republicans clash in fiery hearing. Everything is, Rosenstein just beat them down and the Republicans look like fools. Every single one of these headlines.
Rosenstein lied like few we've ever seen before. And also, does Rose only have one tie? Does he only own one tie? Because
think it's a Trump tie?
I don't think so. I think it's a crooked Hillary brand.
It's too short because it comes up to here above his belly button.
But he only ever wears the same tie. Anytime I've seen him do a public appearance, he only ever wears the same tie.
Yeah.
Pink and salmon colored tie. Weird. Anyway, there's other things to talk about. The immigration debate, while having died down as the facts spread and the lies retreat, while having died down, it is still a thing. They are still trying to foment unrest, foment a civil war if they can get one over having open borders. And now ICE has been forced to barricade their DC headquarters to keep these people out, to prevent an occupation, to keep them out of the building. They've been forced to send service to the home of even junior staffers of the White House because they fear that they're going to be injured. These lunatics assaulted McConnell's wife. And people said, assaulted? They were just yelling. No, you could very clearly see if those bodyguards hadn't have been there, that woman would have left in an ambulance.
I want to make a very, very valid point here, though. Her name is Elaine Chao?
Yes.
Yes. She's, I think, 60 years old. When they first came at her, she just shouted him down, and they sat there and they were like stone faced, scared the corner.
Oh yeah, these people never ever like to pick on people their own size. I mean, they really don't. And that is one thing I think worthy of pointing out. The way that they charged her, she got right up in their face, and they sort of backed down. But I'm telling you, I think if those security guards weren't there, I think they would have hurt her because
You
these
think
people
so?
were really deranged. They were drugged up.
Elaine looks pretty tough.
Or she would have hurt them, but somebody would have gotten hurt. Somebody, I think punches would have flown one way or the other if those security guards weren't there. But the lunacy continues. There are apparently concentration camps somewhere that are that are filled with children. Nobody can seem to find them, but it's an invention of the media. It's a fake news story. The assault continues, but Trump is running very effective offense against this. He's doing more rallies than I've ever seen him. Is booming. He's winning before the Supreme Court. He's winning before lower courts. The Democrats are melting down. Now in a poll that is plus 12 oversampled for Democrats, they're down 8. I mean,
Wow.
this is not looking good for the midterms. This is not looking good for Democrats. The only Democrats that are really making a splash are these, which we talked about earlier in the show, which alienate the majority of people outside of New York City. And so the meltdown of the Democrats continues. I think Trump called it a collapse. He may have used different terminology, but that's indeed what it is. It's not looking good. Now, I don't want people to feel a false sense of security. You've still got to get out there and vote. You've still got to keep up the fight. This isn't over by any means, but it is looking good. We are
Well,
making progress.
Yeah, and I'm seeing another little line that seems to be creeping in there. It seems the media is creeping in there. It seems the media is trying to give the impression that Melania and Donald have this kind of chasm between them about this whole immigration thing, and that she's been, kind of distraught. I mean, CNBC is putting this, CNN and others, that somehow that there's this tension between them, and now she's asking the right questions. But it seems that the media now is trying to create this fictitious, I don't know if it's fictitious, but they're creating this what apparent rift between her and the president.
Right, right. And of course, the facts are not on their side. There's 12,000 kids in here. Only 1,700 are, even came with their parents. Most of them were being sex trafficked across the border. And those 1,700, you've got to ask, well, if a parent would drag their kid through the Sonoran Desert to make it into the United States and break the law in the process, do they deserve to have their kid? Is their kid really in good shape with them, or are they in better shape at what looks like a high-end summer retreat?
If it is their,
If it is their kid, even, and that's very unclear. If they El Salvador or Guatemala and not from Mexico, as many of them are, it's the biggest scam in history. They say they're from Central America. That way they get in under asylum laws. They're not. They have fake papers. This is all very common. This is all very well known. If the leftists or the media would take 5 seconds to interview a member of ICE or to interview a member of the Border Patrol. This is all very well known. And then you see they've gone away from that. Gayle King tried to do something like that. It didn't work out. The guy corrected her. He was Hispanic, and it was just a disaster segment for their propaganda arm. They are the agitprop wing of the Democrat Party, of course, our American mainstream media. So it continues, though, and it's going to go on for another week, I think, and then it'll finally peter out. But now their focus is the Supreme Court, how to obstruct Trump's Supreme Court pick.
oh, by the weekend, we're going to forget all about immigrant children.
Yeah. So what's coming next? How are they going to obstruct this here? What are they going to do to run interference? Going to be Russia stuff? Is it going to be Mueller stepping up his pace?
I don't know, but they don't really have a whole lot to base it on. They wanted to use this idea, the McConnell precedent that he set with Obama, saying that you shouldn't be able to nominate a Supreme Court justice in a
Mueller. That's my guess. It's a guess. It's only a guess, but I think it's going to come vis-a-vis Mueller. I think Mueller's going to leak some new stuff pretty soon, maybe tonight.
Well, how will that prevent Trump from doing the nomination?
Because I think they're going to try to say, well, look what Mueller found. We're just going to have to wait till this is all adjudicated to let him make a decision.
But the Republicans have a majority in the in the Senate and the House. There's just no stopping it. I mean, they don't have a leg
They'll
to stand on.
They'll try.
Yeah, of
And
course they will. I mean,
but
but what can they do? Maybe they can rush the White House.
I wouldn't put it past them. I wouldn't put it past Mad Maxine and her group of brainless lemmings to do something like that. But we're going to keep up with it. We're going to continue to cover it. This was a jam-packed show. I'm thinking, are we missing anything? Is there anything coming that we're not making people aware of? Are we missing anything, Ernie?
No, but the takeaway is winning.
The takeaway is winning. The takeaway is winning. It's been a spectacular week of win after win after win for Donald J. Trump, for America, for the country, and Democrats couldn't be any angrier about it. That is the takeaway.
So this is the way I see it, Jacob, is that not only is he winning, but he's gaining political capital. The divide between the left and the right is increasing dramatically. And the people that are not willing to go to the left, they're not going to go that far left. I mean, middle America is definitely not going that, to the socialist route. That leaves them only one place to go. And I think that poll that we're talking
do bike locks and pepper spray, that's just what they do. So they're getting more and more extreme. That's really what people need to watch out for. They need to be careful. I would take,
and not just the people in the administration. I believe that they're going to start taking this to virtually anybody that is supportive of this administration. It's a very small and vocal group, but they're going to cause some problems, and they're going to attack anybody that they see that triggers them.
You're right. I think it's just a matter of time before we see Alan Dershowitz, a Democrat, get kicked out of a restaurant. I predict it. It's right on the horizon. So you heard it here first, and you got to keep your eyes open for that. In the meantime, just a couple of announcements. We've got a new podcast on the Washington. We'll take credit for it. It's by Laura Loomer, who I'm sure you guys all know, and you see her stuff. You can check out our site, thewashingtonreporter.com. You can even donate on there if you so choose. So there's a lot of ways you can get involved. A lot of ways you can interact with us and share the show and get the truth out there, because
we would really appreciate iTunes reviews.
Yeah, we can't forget that. Leave a 5-star review on iTunes. That's huge. It helps us break through the algorithm and the censorship. It's incredible. That's what you got to do, is leave a 5-star review. So it's been a great show, Ernie. I guess we'll see the folks back on Monday. But thanks for listening, folks, and we'll see you next time.